Your golf ball is the most technologically advanced, or it's not. Your golf ball is either the most consistent, or it's not. It's the most trusted, or it's not. The fact is, it's either Titleist, the best performing golf ball in the world, or it's not. Prove it for yourself. Titleist, the #1 ball in golf. What will you play?
Hello and welcome to episode 131 of The Thing About Golf, the podcast series from Golf Australia magazine trying to solve the riddle of just what it is that draws people so completely into this game. Rod Murray's my name, but once again it's my colleague John Huggan who takes the reins this week for an interview that, well, I'll let him tell you a bit about. Huggy, welcome. Tell the listeners who it is that they'll be listening to on this episode. I think it's a voice they might find familiar.
Yeah, well, Tim Barter has been with Sky Sports now for just over 3 decades, unbelievably. He's still got all his hair, so he doesn't look that old, but you can tell that really resonates with me.
I was going to say, he's trolling you with that, isn't he?
But yeah, he's an interesting story, Tim. He came from a different background than you would normally imagine. Golf. I don't think anybody in his family even plays golf, even now. But yeah, he's sort of working class background. Played football as a kid. Discovered golf. Took off. Turned pro early. Became a club pro. Became a good teacher, and then worked his way into or fell into a television role. And he's done a bit of everything, really. I mean, he's been a commentator. He interviews on the course. He interviews after the round. He's been the on-course guy. He's very versatile, very knowledgeable, and talks at 100 miles an hour, as people will discover when they listen to this podcast. So you have to wait for your moment to interject.
Tough gig too. That's a whole other career. Nothing about being a golf professional would prepare you for broadcasting, particularly on-course reporting, where you're never given enough time. They always come to you after the shot's already been hit and they already know the result. Somebody's talking in your ear while you're trying to do it. Then they ask you to interview players. It's a really tough job. He might be one of the best at it. It's a shame in some ways that he's on the European tour. He doesn't get seen by as many as could. He's as good at it as anybody, isn't he, Huggy?
He is, absolutely. I mean, he's one of the great warriors in sport as well. I mean, he just frets about everything, about getting it right and making a mistake. And I don't know why, because he's so good at what he does, but he needs to be told that a bit more. I'm not sure if anyone is whispering in his ear about just how good a job he does. But I've always been a fan, and I was interested in his story. There was some of it I didn't know, which is unusual, these things. I mean, it's a bit like being a lawyer in this job. You only ask the questions that you know the answers to, but sometimes it's better not to know the answers. And with Tim, it was certainly that worked well, I thought.
You've been more than critical more than once of people on television at various times. Some actually add to the experience. I think Barter's one of those, one of the few. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he knows what he's talking about, and he asks good questions. I mean, he's always, I hear him in media centres asking journalists, and me included, he wants to be more like a journalist when he's asking these questions, which is not really easy to do on television because they're not looking for, hard-hitting, investigative stuff. It's pretty bland, most of it. But he does a really good job of taking it beyond bland and into interesting.
Yeah, agreed. And a remarkable set of skills, and I hope people enjoy it as much as I have and you have. Thanks for joining us to take some time to intro it.
My pleasure. Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Thing About Golf podcast. My guest this time around is one of my favourite voices on Sky Sports, has been for almost 3 decades now, so he's older than we think. Tim Barter, what was and is the thing about golf for you?
What was and is the thing about golf for me? Actually, it was individual sport in the first place. Academically hopeless at school. Sporty, individual, played lots of team sports. Probably above average in terms of a player in a team.
Right.
But my teams never used to win.
What sports are we talking about?
Football, cricket, rugby, basketball, pretty much everything I tried.
Okay.
And I was, as I say, reasonably good at all of them, not a superstar, but reasonably good at all of them, but played in teams which you never seem to win. And I'm extremely competitive, and losing all the time was no fun whatsoever. And actually the way I got into golf is really quite quirky, so I'll tell you the story. was a massive Manchester United fan. Basically, when I was 6 years old, England won the World Cup.
Really? I've never heard that before.
Well, incredible. I know you want to deny it, but it is true. So 1966, and Bobby Charlton, I was 6 years of age, watching the semi-final, Bobby Charlton scored twice. And I apparently said to my father, he is my hero, because he's got us in the World Cup final. Whoever he plays for, I will support. And he supported, Manchester United player, legend.
Okay.
And so I supported Manchester United from that day onwards. European Cup, obviously 68, just fueled it. And I wanted to be Bobby Charlton. So as a footballer, I would practice at the end of a cul-de-sac road that I lived on. I painted a goal on the wall outside my house and kicked balls incessantly at it. Charlton, Law, best, goal, all day long. And after several weeks of this, a neighbour of mine came out of the house tearing his hair out on a Sunday morning, trying to read the newspaper. He said, I'm just trying to have a nice, quiet Sunday morning and read the newspaper, and all I can hear is this chant of goal every 30 seconds. If I give you some golf clubs, will you go away? And I thought, golf, okay, individual sport, basically down to me as to how I perform.
And you've never tried it before that?
Never tried it before that. My family are not sporty at all, so I really hadn't tried any sports really up to that point other than the team events I played and no individual sport. Right. So took the golf clubs, went off and thought, okay, I can control my own destiny here, because I was always quite a hard worker at the sports I played and practiced. And just bitten by the bug immediately. I mean, the game drives you completely potty because it's not perfectible, and I am a perfectionist, so it doesn't work. Yeah. But I just fell in love with it from that point onwards and was able to reach a reasonable standard and have had the luck to have a career in it. So.
Did you get good quite quickly?
Yes, I did get reasonably good quite quickly. Yeah. I think I started at 12. By the time I was 14, I was sort of knocking it around 4 or 5 over par. Showed some talent. Didn't really join a club until quite late, until I was about 15. Joined the local municipal course, the Downshire Golf Club at Bracknell. Didn't have much of an amateur career. Basically, just turned pro as soon as I could, because I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I was just going to ask Severiano Ballesteros just to slide aside as European number one, and I was going to take over. Right. Didn't work out, hence I'm talking to you.
No, it's funny that. Not only for you, I would imagine. But so where did it take you then?
In what sense?
When you turned pro?
I turned pro initially. I wanted to be an assistant pro and try and go through that process of getting qualified as an assistant pro, and at the same time try and become a tour player. Yeah. My local club was the Downshire. So that was the obvious place to try and start, but there weren't any available spots at the time, so I went to work in a clothes shop for 6 months, which I didn't enjoy at all. Frustrated, wanted to be out on the golf course and wasn't, but needed to earn some money. Yeah. And again, slightly quirky story. I don't know if you want to hear, but I'll give you the short version.
We're here for stories, Tim.
Okay, you're here for stories. So a chap called Roger Mace, a legendary club professional, amongst PGA pros, he's one of the very best there is, a lecturer in merchandising at the PGA school, so he teaches people, or did teach people, how to run a successful pro shop, and he was a genius at it. And he was the club pro at Downshire. I was an aspiring young player with a bit of cockiness about me. And exactly. Okay, yeah. And a particular occasion, I went out playing on the course on my own, just in an evening, and I think I just won one of the big championships there, the match play championship, whatever. And there was a bit of ill feeling towards a kid winning this. Yeah. And there's a hole called the 7th hole, has a ditch in the middle of it, and you drive down one side of the ditch and then you cross over the ditch for your second. And so I was following a man and his wife around the golf course. They were playing ahead of me. I drove down the left-hand side of the fairway, and the ball physically went past them, but not over the ditch, so they were never in any danger. Right. But when I got up there, he started shouting at me and saying, you drove the ball through me and this, that, and the other. I said, well, you're on the other side of the ditch. I can't get to you. Doesn't matter, blah, blah, blah. I get in, professional calls me down to the bottom of the driving range for a telling off. So I get down there and he says, oh, Mr. Smith has complained about you, said you drove through. And I said, I didn't. I drove down the left side of 7. You know perfectly well I can't get over that ditch. He was never in any danger. I could never hurt him, so I didn't need to shout 4. Yeah. He said, well, I'm inclined to believe him. So I said, so you're calling me a liar? Ooh. And he said, well, I suppose I am. And I said, well, you can stick it where the sun doesn't shine. Yeah. And went at him big style. Mm-hmm. Whereupon he banned me from the course. Yeah. So that was that. So now I've had to go home and say to my parents, I'm banned from the golf club. I'm not allowed to go there.
You sound a bit like me, I have to say.
Well, exactly. Anyway, sometime later, I was invited to play, I think, in a county match of some sort, and it was at the Downshire. And I said, I can't play there, I'm banned. And they said, well, you need to go and make it good. So I went to see Mr. Mace, and I asked him, could I please come and play the county, need me to play this match here and whatever. And initially he said, no, go away, you're a bad lad. So as I was walking away, he shouted, okay, you can. If it's for the county, make sure you win the match. So I went and won the match anyway. And some months later, now I'm working in the clothes shop, Roger Mace approaches me and said, I've got an assistant professional spot available. I've got 2, actually. Barry Lane took the other one.
Right.
He said, I've got 2 spots available for assistant pro. I think you'd make a decent assistant pro. And I said, but you hate me. And he said, well, that doesn't matter. I think you'll make a good assistant pro, and I'm going to offer you the position. Would you like it? So I took it.
Yeah.
And amazingly, on the first day, he said to me, there are 3 rules being one of my assistants. You're not allowed to swear anywhere on this complex. You're not allowed to smoke anywhere on this complex. And you don't go anywhere near my 2 very attractive daughters that are about your age. So I said, okay, fine. The first day, Barry and I were caught smoking around the back of the workshop,
right,
to which we both swore when he caught us, so we broke 2 rules, and I ended up marrying his daughter.
Well, there you go.
And divorcing later.
Yeah.
But, so I broke all those rules.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the start, being an assistant at the Downshire Municipal course, where there are a million stories.
It's an unlikely route.
It is an unlikely route.
And it sounds like you've got an unlikely background for somebody in golf as well. In terms of you said your family are not into sport.
No, family are very much into theatre. Mum and Dad were very much amateur dramatics. Mum was a very good singer, so I was supposed to tread the boards, and I suppose in a kind of minor way I did.
Yeah.
But that was the route I was supposed to go down, is become a thespian.
Right.
And spat my stuff.
And how far did the playing get?
I turned pro in 1976 at the age of 16. At the age of 19, I was then quite successful in the sort of south of England region, winning a fair amount of things. Barry and I were sort of vying for things. He was always that little bit better than I was. But we were pretty close, and we both won championships against each other. And then in 1979, I went for my European Tour card in Portugal. And I was lucky, actually, because I couldn't afford to go. My parents couldn't afford to fund it. And the members of the club chipped together to pay for me to travel. Yeah. And I managed to sneak a card at the first attempt, which Barry didn't, much to the boss's amusement, because Barry was always the superstar.
Yeah.
And I rang up to say, I got my card. And he said, how did Barry get on? I said, no, he didn't get through. He said, no, Barry. And I said, yeah, he didn't get through. Yeah. So you got your card and Barry didn't. So I kind of knew I was up against it. But, I could see it. And in the end, he was absolutely right, because Barry Lane turned into a world-class player.
It's a strange week, that. It shows how it can go either way,
absolutely,
doesn't it?
Yeah. But I just worked really hard. I practiced till my hands bled just to get myself in a position. I knew I was going to wet myself going out under that sort of pressure. And I just thought, if I can make this enough autopilot, I might be able to get through it even with the pressure, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
I then didn't have any money to go anywhere, so I was trying to work 3 jobs, being an assistant pro, working in a pub, giving some lessons, whatever, trying to get enough money together to go to the tournaments. And at that stage, even if you had a card, you still had to Monday qualify.
Yeah.
And I just never did. I played 5 Monday qualifiers, lost twice in a playoff, ran out of what little money I had, couldn't afford to go to any of the foreign tournaments, was basically driving around England and Britain trying to play tournaments that way. And I just thought, you're not good enough. I'd found out by that stage I wasn't good enough. I didn't have the funding. I tried to get sponsorship and it didn't work. So I thought, I need to become the best club pro in the country, because I'm clearly not destined to ask Seve to step aside.
Right. Well, before we get into the coaching side of it, what was the biggest event you played in?
Oh, crikey. Nothing really of any massive stature. I mean, no, nothing really. I mean, just local
Didn't make it into the
championships.
Open or anything like that?
No. I lost in a playoff at regional qualifying for the Open, having slept in a caravan overnight, another story. Was supposed to be in a hotel, and that didn't work out. So I lost in a playoff there. But no, that was the closest I ever got, really. But as I say, I was relatively little engaged in it, because once I'd got my card and failed, I realised I wasn't good enough. My technique wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
And at the time, you didn't have video cameras and things that you could look at yourself. First time I saw my swing was when I was 25, probably.
Yeah, that's a very mature and very difficult decision to take. How hard was that?
It wasn't difficult.
See, people ask me about it. I was a decent amateur, no better.
You were better
than
than I was, yeah.
Well, I don't know, but I knew I wasn't good enough. So I never had a mental issue with not being good enough, because I knew I wasn't. Right. I always knew I wasn't. But people still, they ask you that question, don't they? Do you regret, not be, well, yeah, I'd like to have been good enough, but I wasn't. So
yeah, I do wonder. I had talent, because now I know that my technique was dreadful, and I still managed to get a card.
Right.
So I had talent, I had tenacity, I had work ethic. And I wonder whether if I'd got some sponsorship and been able to relax and not work 3 jobs, whether I could have become a tour player, but never a great tour player. So that's the only sort of doubt I have in my mind. If I'd had that little bit of funding, could I have gone on and played some European Tour events and experienced that, which I'd love to have done. But I knew I was not destined to be a superstar as soon as I sort of saw the standard, because I'd gone from winning regional events going to a Monday qualifier. I remember the first one I played in. Ian Woosnam was a good friend of mine. He used to come and stay in our part of the world and got to know him well. And I played in my first Monday qualifier. I think I shot a couple under par, came in thinking, well, that'll qualify quite comfortably. And saw Woosie, and he said, what did you shoot? I said, 69. He went, yeah, you'll miss by 2. And I thought, what? There's 15 guys going to shoot 67 or better. And he said, oh, yeah, absolutely. And I said, it's blowing a bit. And he said, doesn't matter. And sure enough, he was right. Yeah. And I suddenly realised, wow, I thought I was a reasonably big fish in a little pool, and now I'm a minnow.
Yeah, I had that same kind of experience. I played a lot of golf with Monty as an amateur. He's miles better than me. I mean, it wasn't even close. I mean, it was laughable how much better. So, why worry about it?
And again, the two people that used to come and practice at my club that I saw who ended up being successful professionals were Pete Cowan and Ian Woosnam, and both of them absolutely stripe it. So that was my benchmark. I thought, well, I've never hit it like that in my life, and I never will. Now I know that they were both exceptional strikers, and not everyone was like that. Yeah. But at the time, I thought, well, I'm miles away, so that was that. So then it was, right, I want to become the best club pro in the country.
You've told me this story before about where you went to America and watched Ledbetter and Haney and these guys teach. So it's safe to say you went at coaching with the same kind of drive that you put into your golf.
Yeah, again,
you kind of just switched gears, really.
Yeah, because whatever I do, I have to try and do it really well. And therefore, I looked at the golf professional side of it and thought, right, how do I become the best club professional in this country as an ambition? My boss was the best merchandising guy in the country, so I could run a golf shop, sit on my head. I'd obviously played to enough of a good standard that I could be a club pro quite happily. Yeah. I happened to work under a really good guy that repaired golf clubs, which was the third element of being a club pro, and I had a high standard of a club repairer. The one element I was weak in was teaching, and my boss didn't really have a massive interest in teaching. So I'd had relative education. I was sent out. You knew more about it than the guy you're going to teach, so go and get on with it. And I wasn't very good, and I knew I wasn't very good. So I then spoke to a few people and asked, how do I become a good teacher? And they said, well, read everything and study all the manuals and the books and watch the videos that were just about coming out at that time. And I did that, and I accrued a certain amount of knowledge. But at the same time, I still felt I'm not going to be a really good coach unless I talk to the really good coaches. So I wrote to all the best coaches that I could sort of figure out in the world. In the UK, it was John Jacobs, John Sterling, John Garner. Old Johns, for some reason, same as you. Yeah. Ledbetter in the States, Tosky, Flick, Ballard, these guys, Hank Haney. So I wrote to them all and said, I'm an aspiring young coach. I would really love to come and watch you teach and see how you do what you do, and learn from you. Is that possible? And all of them said yes.
Wow.
Which was terrific. Everyone, yeah. Everyone said yes. Ledbetter's management company charged me, but when David found out, he refunded it.
Well, I can believe that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they said, if you're going to come and, basically learn from his knowledge, you need to pay a fee. And it was 150 quid for the day. And I said, no problem. So I turned up, paid him 150 quid, learned a tremendous amount, got to know David very well, considering him a friend now. And he said, you shouldn't have had to pay. We'll get the money refunded and you can come anytime you like.
Yeah, his first book was beautifully written.
Yes, yeah. So, I learned an awful lot about coaching all sorts of players, and the person who wrote that book is obviously sitting next to me here. So yes, actually our connection comes through Golf World magazine, so that's where my teaching break eventually came from.
Right.
So
yeah, John Sterling was involved at Golf World when I was there, and many moons ago now. But yes, he was terrific.
Wonderful
great stories.
One of the greatest after-dinner speakers you will have ever heard. Sadly, no longer with us, but a wonderful speaker. And he gave me one of my sayings: the protection of orthodoxy. He felt that if a golf swing was orthodox...
What is that, though?
Well, in nowadays terms, something different. But at the time, it was, good fundamentals, swinging the club on plane, swinging it the right length, etc., etc. So having good orthodoxy behind you, you've got to do quite a lot wrong for it to go pear-shaped. If you're someone who's got a quirky golf swing, it relies on compensations, then it can go wrong. And when it goes wrong, it can go wrong quite big. Yeah. So I quite like that idea from John, that the protection of orthodoxy means if you're doing everything by the book, if you want to, inverted commas, put it that way, you're going to have a pretty decent golf game.
Now, here, I'll be interested in your answer to this, because I was lucky enough when I was at Golf Digest in America, I was ghostwriting for Ledbetter, Haney, Peter Costas, the top guys in their field. And there was a difference between them and the guys, the next sort of stage down, who taught for the Golf Digest schools, or, there was a difference. What is that difference? What makes them great as opposed to just good?
I think communication is the biggest thing. I think communication I remember being invited to go to the Professional Golf Association in Britain and potentially be a lecturer to teach the younger guys how to become coaches and qualify them. And I had a blackboard and a piece of chalk, and I said, right, give me the attributes of a teacher, a really good teacher. Give me the attributes. Oh, you've got to be punctual, you've got to be well-dressed, you've got to be smart, you've got to be personable. And they listed 100 things.
Anybody can do those things.
And I'm going, all right, okay, you're missing the biggest one of all. And nobody got it. And I said, communication. I said, if you can't communicate your knowledge to the person that you're trying to teach, you're dead in the water. I said, if I talk to a Chinese guy who doesn't understand my language, I can't help him other than getting hold of him moving around. Yeah. So communication is the number one thing. And I think with those guys, having watched a lot of them work, the variety of ways they've got of doing the same thing. So people learn in very different ways, some auditorily, some kinesthetically, some by watching, whatever. So you've got to be able to adapt your style to a person's learning style and also have more than one way of doing something. So if you put something to a player and they look at you and go, I don't get that, I can't feel it, or I don't understand the concept, you've got to have another way and another way and another way. And I think that's probably where I developed as a coach, through watching those guys and realizing they don't always get it right first hit. But they then say, right, okay, let's try that another way. Let's think of it this way, or let's try it with this exercise or drill. And they find a way that suits the character they're teaching. So I think communication and a variety of different ways to fix a problem.
There's still an indefinable part of it, though, isn't there? The truly great ones.
Yes.
I mean, it's hard to put. It's like what makes a great player, you know, you and Barry Lane coming up together. I mean, what made the difference between you and Barry? I mean, it's the same kind of thing. It's a very difficult thing to define once you get up to the real top level, I think.
It is. And also, obviously, not every coach suits every player. So you will find a coach who particularly clicks with a player and might be hopeless with another player.
Yeah.
So it's not just you are a great teacher, you'd be great for everybody. You have to find the people that you work well with. And
failures.
They have, exactly, yeah. So, you know, Ledbetter's had a massive amount of success with a massive amount of different styles of player, but he's also had his failures. Yeah. So, you know, even as good as he is, he doesn't suit everybody. And the same's true of someone like Pete Cowan, who I have massive admiration for. I think he's one of the best coaches in the world. Butch Harmon, exactly the same. All of them wonderful coaches, but they suit different styles and thinkers of players and personalities. Yeah.
Exactly. So at what point did you think yourself a good coach then?
Having done that research, which I did sort of in the early 80s, I got my first club job as a full professional at Hartley Whitney Golf Club when I was 23, quite young, and 1983 that would have been. And so I started by running the shop and saying, right, this is what my boss has taught me to make. I can make a good living doing this. And it was on a main road, so I got signs up, golf shop open to the public, and it kicked off. Yeah. So I spent the first couple of years really working hard at building that business, servicing the members, looking after them, playing golf with them, and doing some teaching, but mainly concentrating on getting the commercial side of it going. And once that had got going, I thought, do you know what? I didn't become a golf pro to be a shop boy. I didn't become a golf pro to be doing VAT. I didn't become a golf pro to talk to reps and negotiate deals.
That's just a businessman.
It's a businessman. So it's making me a good living and terrific. But I thought I became a golf pro to be involved in the game of golf, and therefore I went to teach more. And because of all the knowledge I'd learnt from all these different individuals, I'd sort of taken different bits from different people and formed my own sort of theories as to how I thought people learnt best and had those variety of tools available to me. So I started coaching thinking, you know, I'm an adequately good coach. Suddenly people are going, you're really good at this. And I've gone, really? And they've gone, well, yeah, I've had loads of golf lessons. No one's ever made it this understandable and, you know, put it in a language where I can actually do it. And you've got exercises and drills, and because they hadn't been exposed to those sort of coaches, I suppose. So I got a reputation pretty quickly, and my lesson diary started to fill up very rapidly. I had a waiting list before too long because I didn't want to teach all day long. I had other things to do. So, yeah, that's when it kind of clicked. Okay, well, obviously, by theft alone, I've gone around and taken other people's ideas and formulated them into a way of teaching that people seem to enjoy, particularly club players.
And when did really good players start coming your way?
Oh, goodness gracious. Horrible story. I never felt good enough, because I do think the guys you talked about earlier on are at a different level. And I think there is an almost Harley Street specialist kind of way of coaching those really top players, which I never felt good enough to do. The only trumpet I would blow of myself is I'm a really good coach of club players. I can help a club player get better. But I didn't ever want to coach tour players because, one, I didn't feel good enough, and two, they're nutters. They're mad, aren't they? They ring you up at 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night and say, I've just thought about my putting stroke. Can you tell me what you think? And I just didn't want that. Yeah. And also, I knew I'd worry too much. I knew if I had a player under my tutelage who was making his living playing the game, that I would really worry. If they started missing cuts, I would be sleepless nights worrying, what am I doing wrong? What am I missing? How can I not help this guy to make a good living? So I didn't want to do it. And a few times I was asked to help people whose coaches had gone home, because the Pete Cowans of this world will be here Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and go home Thursday night. So a couple of times, like Darren Clark, who I'd got to know quite well through my TV work, he would say to me, Barty, Pete's gone home. Can you help me? I'm struggling. And a couple of times Darren won on the occasions that I helped him. One very notable one at Monte Castillo. I came off the golf course, Volvo Masters, came off the golf course having on-course commentated. Note thrust into my hand by a marshal, are you Tim Barter? Yes. Note, come to the range. Go to the range. Darren Clark is on the range with Chubby Chandler, his manager. Golf clubs strewn all over the floor, head spinning.
Yeah.
And I think it was after the third round. So he'd played very well for the first two rounds, got into a position to win, didn't play very well at all on the third round. Pete had gone home, panic stations, and had seen and talked technique with me before, and we'd done a little bit of work a couple of times. And I got to the range, and he said, "Sort this out now!" And I said, "Darren, you're in no fit state to work." I said, "Look at this golf club strewn all over the place. You're completely lost the head."
I've seen him like that.
Oh, absolutely. So lovely. I adore Darren, one of my favourite people. But when he's in a bad mood with the golf club, it's not a pretty sight. Yeah. So I said, "Look, Darren, you're not in a workable state." And Chubby's shaking his head and saying, "You're absolutely right. He's not workable." So I said, "Look, go off, have some nice dinner. Heather's just arrived. His wife sadly passed away now, but his Heather just arrived. Go and have some dinner. Tomorrow morning, come out an hour early and we'll fix it." No, it's got to be now. So I said, "No, I'm not doing it." I said, "Look at you can't converse with me. You're that upset."
Yeah.
I said, "You're swinging at 1,000 miles an hour." I said, "I can't tell what's going on." So eventually I said, "Look, I'm not doing it, Darren. I'm not on the payroll. I can say no," and I'm saying no. So he said, "You promise you'll fix it in the morning?" I said, "Yes, I promise." And I'm walking away thinking, what are you doing? But I like the fella and, whatever, he's a friend of mine. So I went off to bed panicking, thinking, I've now promised him.
Yeah.
Anyway, he woke up the following morning in a better state of mind. We went out on the thing. It was relatively straightforward. So I said a couple of little things and said, "Look, you just need to focus on that, this, that, and the other." Out in 29, leading the tournament. Thank you very much. Actually, interestingly enough, I heard him have a conversation with Billy Foster, his caddy, as they drove to the 10th tee because it was a buggy ride. And he said to Billy, "I'm so excited I could go at every flag round this back nine. You are now in charge. You lead me round." So Billy said, "Right, 4-iron, short of that left-hand trap, wedge 25 feet left of the pin, boom, boom," because he was winning. Yeah. And he guided him around the back nine. And I think he shot 63 and won the Volvo Masters. So that was my first kind of experience of being dragged into a situation and it working.
Yeah.
Andrew Coulthard, and now is a colleague of mine, saw me do that a couple of times and said, "I want you to be my coach."
Now, I've talked to him about this, and he agrees, I think, that he was almost a lost cause, given the way the game was changing, because he couldn't hit it far enough. He couldn't swing it fast enough, for whatever reason. Is that still the verdict on him?
No, I don't.
That's what he thinks.
Yes, I think at the time, I obviously worked with him before that phase.
Right.
I think ultimately that probably was his downfall.
The game passed him by a bit.
Yeah.
As it's done for many.
But I personally still think there was a way we could have cranked up the speed, and we didn't get to that point for reasons that I can go on and explain. But the story with him is quite interesting because he came to me and said, "Will you coach me? Will you coach me?" I said, "No, I don't want to coach torpedoes. I don't think I'm good enough. I think I'd ruin you. I don't want to do it. I'd cry when you miss cuts. It's no good. I'm not going to do it." So I refused and refused and refused, and he kept coming back. And Chubby kept coming to me and saying, "He wants you to be his coach. He's heard you teach Darren. He loves the language you use, the simplicity. He wants it that way. He doesn't want Pete Cam, albeit that Pete's brilliant. Yeah. He doesn't think he resonates with the language."
I've had Pete trying to explain things to me, and I'm thinking, I don't understand that.
Yeah. So he wanted me to coach him, and I said no. So I went back to my golf club at Botley Park in Southampton, where I was the club pro at the time. And I went out for a 9 o'clock on a Monday morning lesson with a Mr. Smith, and standing in front of me is Andrew Coulthard. And I said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "I'm Mr. Smith, you're 9 o'clock. And I said, "Well, isn't that a doozy?"
I've never heard that before. That's good.
So he said, I couldn't get at you, so I booked a lesson under Mr. Smith. Now, come on, help me.
Yeah.
And I still said, "No, I'm not doing it." And he said, "Look, come on, you're my mate, you're my pal. I'm really struggling. There's something going on." He said, I'm missing the target 10 yards right all the time, and I can't figure it. Yeah. Can you just have a look at my fundamentals as a mate? Don't have to coach me, whatever. Just have a look at me and see if there's something basic going wrong." He was aiming 40 yards right, and he didn't realise it.
Yeah.
And it was weird because I had 150-yard markers down my range, one left and one right. I said, aim at the 150 on the left with a medium iron. And he aimed at the one on the right. So I repeated it, and he looked at me like, yes, I am aiming at the one on the left. But he was actually 40 yards right. So I then filmed him at the oblique angle, which was behind him pointing where he was pointing. And he looked at me like, what are you doing there? I understand you filming from in front and behind, but why are you at an angle? I said, I'll show you in a minute. Yeah. So then I pointed out the fact he was aiming 40 yards right and actually was pulling it 30 yards rather than pushing it 10.
Yeah.
And he said, right, how do we sort it? And I said, well, it's not easy. He said, I'm not playing for 6 weeks, so you can do what you like. And I said, well, if we point you in the right direction, keeping it very simple, you're going to miss the target miles left because you've learned to swing and pull it back onto your target. And eventually your instinct will work you back to the target, but it'll take a while. I said, so either we incrementally move you a bit and keep you vaguely playable, or we go for it. Yeah. And if you're not playing for 6 weeks, I think you could probably do that. So he said, let's just do it in one go. So we aimed him straight and he oiked it left and we figured it. So we got that sorted in a few days, really. And then he said, what about my grip? I hate my grip. And I said, Andrew, you're a fine player. You've had a fine amateur career.
How many people change their grips?
Oh, for goodness sake. Yeah. And he's already a really fine player. And he's got a very, very strong left-hand grip. In other words, he's got 4 knuckles visible on his left hand if you open it, the palm's looking straight down, but he didn't like it. And I said, Andrew, you cannot change your grip at this stage of your career because you'd have to change your entire golf swing because your golf swing is built around that grip. You are a body-orientated player because if you used your hands, you'd hook it. So you've learnt to swing that way. If we change your grip, you'd have to change everything. I want to do it. I said, well, I'm not helping you. Go away. And I don't know why. He had a persuasive talent.
He sounds a bit mad.
Oh, mad. But he said, show me how you do it if you were going to do it. I said, no, because you'll go and do it. And he said, no, just show. And somehow he persuaded me to show him how I'd go about it. And one of the things I did actually came from my boss. When I changed my grip from a strong grip and I was a hooker, he took me to a golf course where you couldn't hook the ball because it was tree-lined, and I realised I had to change. And he said, right, not only am I going to show you how to hold it, but I want you to put a club at the bottom of the stairs, a club at the top of the stairs, a club in your bedroom, and a club in the toilet. And every time you pass a club, you have to grip it 10 times. Now, in the course of a day, you do 1,000. Yeah. So I gave that to Andrew and said, use it if you like, whatever. But if you want to get used to this, you don't need to be hitting balls. You just need to get used to the feel of it first and foremost. Anyway, but I said, don't do it. Do not do it. I'm not taking responsibility because it will ruin you. A week later, he rings up and says, done it. And I went, yeah. So came down to Botley, stood up with the most beautiful orthodox grip. Couldn't hit a cow's arse with a banjo. No. But he was happy with his grip. So we worked on his technique because I don't know why. And he said, I'm going to go and play it. This feels good. And I said, you said you got 6 weeks off. You're only 3 weeks in or whatever it was. He said, there's a tournament in Madeira next week or somewhere, Tenerife, Madeira. I'm going to go and test it. And I went, you'll shoot 95. Anyway, he finished 4th. Finished 2nd the following week. Chubby rang me up and said he's not taking no for an answer. He's not taking no for an answer. You are now signed. It's done. Right. There's this percentage or whatever the thing was. Right. Yeah. And that was it. And the next minute, I had 6 players on my books. Somehow. And I never wanted any of them. Yeah. And I've wanted rid of them ever since that day. Yeah. And I've still got one. Yeah, Richard Plan's the only one that's still around. Exactly, yeah. I mean, most of them, actually, one of them quite funnily, Matt Blackie, I used to work with, lovely fella. Yeah. Very, very talented player, but again, short in stature, didn't hit the ball very far, again, overtook him really. But he came up with a nickname. He called me The Reason. And I said, okay, why? And he said, because you're the reason none of us are on tour anymore. And I said, well, I warned you to start with. Yeah. But, in reality, we did some good work and we had some success with each of them. But, it wasn't my forte, I don't think.
Titleist is the #1 ball in golf. Yes, being #1 is a number, and more players trust the Pro V1 or Pro V1X than all other golf balls combined. But being #1 is more than a number. It's a mindset. It's a relentless mission to design and manufacture the best performing golf balls in the game, so you can chase whatever your #1 is. Titleist, the #1 ball in golf.
Now, I must ask you about Seve, because I know you've worked a little bit with Seve. You mentioned him already, and I love Seve. We've recently done one of these podcasts with Javier Ballesteros, Seve's son, who sounds just like his dad and looks like his dad.
Exactly.
Spooky, but Seve was my hero. Sounds like he was yours as well. Tell me about that.
Yeah, the experience of my life outside wife and kids and stuff, but... I suppose I was introduced to TV by Ewan Murray, and also introduced to Seve by Ewan Murray, who became a friend of mine. And I went to a company day that Seve was doing, I think East Sussex National or somewhere. And Ewan said, let's go down and watch him, in a casual environment, and you can get to know him and this, that, and the other. So I went down and chatted with him anyway. He was struggling with his game, and Ewan said, Tim's a really good coach. Why don't you let him have a look? And at the time, Seve was letting anybody have a look. Yeah. And so I did a little bit.
Part of the problem.
Exactly right. I remember Billy Foster putting up the no coaches sign that he'd stolen from a pub, meaning no vehicle coaches are allowed. He put no coaches on the bag, which was a good one. But yeah, I did a bit of work with him then, and he improved, which was great. And that was it, really. And then I went to the Spanish Open at Club de Campo in 1995. I was on-course commentating. My colleague on-course was Ken Brown. I was walking down the 10th hole at Club de Campo. Ken Brown was on the 11th tee, the par 3, which is set below the 10th fairway. And I could see him giving Seve a long game lesson. Now, Brownie's one of my greatest friends and one of the brilliant short game coaches of the world. But what he knows about a golf swing, not really. So he saw me and went, oh, my God, there is a proper golf coach, and called me down and said, can you help Seve? He's asking me for advice on his swing. And clearly, as you know, I don't know a lot about swing. So would you have a look at him? And Seve said, oh, yes, Tim, help me. He used to call me Ting. Ting. Yeah. I really struggle. Ting. Olazabal, he is going to take my crown as Spanish #1, as the king. I cannot have it. I need to do this. So I had a look at him, and it was quite complicated because he was hitting a shot that was starting left and going left a lot.
Yeah.
A pull draw.
I saw him do that at the Ryder Cup.
Yeah. Tom Lehman first tee, that shot. And he was hitting it a lot. And mistakenly, he believed, and understandably so, because John Jacobs, my great hero as a coach, wrote lots of books explaining that ball flight tells you everything about your golf swing. And in 99% of cases, if the club face is open, the ball goes to the right. So if it starts to the left, you must be swinging to the left. So there was an adage that, the ball starts where you swing it and then it goes where the club face tells it. Yeah. We now know the club face is more powerful than the swing direction, and therefore it's a bit more complicated than that. But that was essentially the message. And it was true for 99% of club players. They come over the top of it, they swing to the left, and they open the club face to get it back to the target, and they slice it. Now, Seve was hitting this shot pull draw, and he therefore said to me, obviously I'm swinging to the left, and I've got a closed club face, because Mr. Jacobs, he's told us that's the story. And I said, well, in this particular instance, you're not. And I said, it's very rare, but you're swinging to the right with a double closed club face. And the club face is more powerful than the swing direction, so it's beating the fact you're swinging a bit to the right, starting left, going left. And he looked at me like, you're mad.
And he'd be trying more and more to swing to the right.
Yes, and making it worse.
Yeah.
And so I said, that's my take on the subject. So you're trying to swing more to the right when you should be doing completely the opposite. And he said, you've got to prove it to me. He said, I don't believe it. He said, Mr. Jacobs. He said, who are you to question Mr. Jacobs? I said, but John knew this, but in his books he wouldn't put for 1% of people, because 99% of people doesn't apply. Yeah. So I said, I can prove it to you. So I got him to line up at a particular target. I put a massive head cover right outside the ball, set at a slight angle where you could only swing on a slight curve into the ball. So if he was swinging to the left, he would hit the head cover on the way to the ball. Yeah. First shot, nuts it straight down the middle. And he turns around and says, you're an idiot and a genius. And I said, go on then. And he said, well, you're an idiot because you're completely wrong. Yeah. But the fact the head cover's there is stopping me swinging to the left. It's making it as an obstacle. Yeah. So I've now swung in the right direction and hit a dead straight shot. So you're dismissed. I said, no, that's not right. Hit another one. So after about 3 shots, he hit this massive pull hook to the left, head cover still sitting beautifully where it was. And he looked very quizzically at me, and I said, there's the proof. I said, you haven't swung to the left because you'd have hit that head cover on your way to the ball. Maybe I came over the head cover. I said, Seve, the tee is still in the ground. You've picked the ball off the top of the tee. Yeah. If you came over the head cover, the angle of attack would be so steep you'd squash the head cover and take a divot. Yeah. I said, you've picked it off the top of the tee.
Now, you're very brave at this point. How intimidating are you at this
I've
point?
got no idea what I was saying. Yeah. I was just so determined. I knew what I was talking about. I know.
People,
and he's looking at me with those eyes.
Yeah,
and he's looking at me and saying, you're an idiot.
I had that as well, yeah.
And the other thing that had happened, which I should add in, is I was supposed to be interviewing on that afternoon. It was a Wednesday afternoon, Spanish Open, 95. I'm supposed to be interviewing. I had to go to my boss and ask to be released to go and coach. And he said, who are you coaching? And I said, I can't tell you. And he said, well, you need to tell me, otherwise I'm not releasing you. And I said, I can't tell you because it'll cause something. And he said, you've got to tell me. And I said, okay, Seve. He said, oh my God, you're going to go and coach Seve at the Spanish Open? I said, yeah. He said, I'm opening the program with it. I'm having cameras on it. I said, no. I said, you can't. If you turn up with a camera, he will dismiss me like you can't believe, and I will lose any faith he's ever had in me. Yeah. and he's a hero of mine. Please don't do it. And he said, I'll do it on a long lens. You won't even know I'm there. I'll do it from the other end of the range, and I'll zoom in, and you won't even know I'm there. So anyway, I'm now coaching Sevi, and the camera is in our face. He couldn't resist it. Yeah. He's in there. There's Tim. There's Sevi. He's coaching him at the Spanish Open. It's magnificent. And so he said, I see you brought your friends. I went, Sevi, I tried everything in my power. And I just said, right, boys, enough. Go away. So then we get to the head cover experience, and I prove the theory. Yeah. So he's very cross because he's been working in the wrong direction for a little while. And so he said, how do we fix it? So we went about fixing it, spent the whole afternoon, spent a little bit of time the following morning, and he went out and won the golf tournament. And I'm not saying for a moment he hit the middle of every fairway, because he didn't. No. But it made him more playable. He was not working in the wrong direction, working in the right one.
Was that at Club de Campo?
It was at Club de Campo. It was his 50th and final win.
Yeah. See, I went there on a Golf World UK assignment when I was living in London. I went to the Spanish PGA Championship at Club de Campo. I did a short game piece with Alathabal, and I wrote a profile of Jose Maria Canizares. But here's the thing, I watched Sevi shoot 64, missing 4 short putts.
Wow.
I mean, it was the best golf I'd ever seen in my life. That was 87.
Right. So, what an experience.
Slightly different from what you're talking about 8 years later.
Yes. So, yeah, that was the story. He won the tournament, which was lovely. Experience of my life. And I'll say, I'm not claiming for a minute that he ripped it down the middle of every throw. He didn't. He used all of his conjuring skills and whatever, but he did at the end of it, which was absolutely lovely. He wrote me a lovely letter, and he said, I owe you a great debt. To which I said, you're not going to pay it, because I know you're not very keen on parting with your cash. No. So he was always lovely with his money. And
I hope you've got that framed.
I have, yeah. And he said, you don't need money, Ting. You don't need money. And he said, but I do owe you a favour. And I said, okay. I currently coach a lot of youngsters, England junior level, regionally. And I set them little tasks around the green to try and get them interested in short game, try and give them some momentum to go out and practice their short game, or some incentive. Yeah. And is it possible I could spend an hour with you around the short game, picking your brains on how you go about it, because you are the best short game we've ever seen. And that was my payment for the help I'd given him. And I did it at Wentworth with him. We did over an hour. And it was incredible. I learnt more in that hour than I've learnt in the rest of my life about short game.
He could do things,
incredible. But the one thing I did learn was the simplicity of it. I mean, he literally chose the simplest shot every single time. And I remember him, one occasion I was sitting at breakfast with Jim Payne, who played on tour, and Sevi had played with Jim and came and sat next to him at the breakfast table and said, do you mind if I comment on your short game? And Jim said, I'd be delighted. And he said, you chose the wrong club on every single shot yesterday. And 2 things struck me. One, that Sevi had actually bothered to take notice, because he was in the middle of playing a tournament himself. Yeah. And 2, how generous of him to come along and say, look, can I help you? Which he did with an awful lot of people. So, yeah, I had this magical hour with him. And the story that I would like to tell, because it is the most remarkable thing I've ever seen with a golf club in my hand, or his hand, was one of the drills I used to do with the youngsters was I used to talk about chipping, and I'd say, look, chipping is a 3-stage process. The first thing you ought to do is plan the chip shot. Where are you going to land it? What trajectory? How much roll are you going to have? Secondly, there's the technique of striking the ball to get that correct. And thirdly, there's then the feel of having enough energy in the club to land it in the position. So I used to make them practice chipping onto a bag towel, which we'd put on the green, wet, so the ball would bounce off it. So you put the bag towel on the green, stand them 7 or 8 yards away and say, right, how many out of 20 can you land on that bag towel? Because that is your objective, is to learn to land the ball where you're trying to land it. So I went through all the drills with Sevi, and I said, would you mind doing the drills for me? And they were so simple for him, it was ridiculous. And he kind of looked at me a couple of times, and I said, can you just do it for me? And he said, but I'm going to get 20 out of 20. I know you know that. And I said, I know, but I just want you to do it, because I can then go back hand on heart and say to the boys, he got 20 out of 20.
Yes.
And we did the towel thing. So he said, what club? I said, any club you like. He said, it was too simple. I said, okay, well, just do it for me. So he started off, and he chipped the first 3 balls landing on the towel. And then he said, I'm going to change it up and make it more interesting. So he then started looking at me whilst doing it. Then he looked at me and stood on one leg and did it. Then he looked at me and stood on one leg with one hand and did it. And he completed the 20 out of 20 doing all those daft things. And I'm standing there going, that's just ridiculously clever. And he said, can we do it again and make it interesting? And I said, yeah, go on then. He said, it's a Titleist bag towel. There are 8 letters. I'd like to try and spell Titleist. And I said, you mean landing balls on letters? And he said, yeah, see how many balls it takes me to land the balls on the letters. And I went, it's impossible. It's like 8, 9 yards away. And he said, no, let's have a go. So we did it, and he took 9 balls to land on 8 letters. And it is the most incredible thing. I'm literally standing with my jaw hanging open saying, I don't believe what I'm seeing. And he looked at me and said, why are you looking like that? And I said, well, this is incredible control. Yeah. And he said, no. He said, I know if I swing this club that far, the ball's going to go 9 yards. I know if I point the club face at the capital T, it'll land on it. I said, point the club face at the capital T. And he said, well, that's how I chip. I choose a very minute target, land the ball on it, and then the ball often goes in the hole, as you've seen. And it remains the most ridiculous thing I've seen. And all the tour pros I've worked with, I've said, have a go. Not even close. No one can even scratch the surface.
Well, that doesn't surprise me. On a similar kind of story, I mean, I was doing a short game piece with him somewhere in Florida years and years ago, and the camera photographer is getting set up, and he's just hitting little chips, maybe 12 yards long, and he's making it skip and stop and then come back 2 or 3 inches on a shot that length, which is, and I said, how do you do that? And he just smiled and did it again and again. And I mean, I've never seen anybody be able to do that.
No, but I mean, I remember Peter Mitchell going into a bunker with him on many occasions and nearest the pin out of the bunker against Seve. You're never going to win. And Seve would go in there with a 5-iron and beat him. And Pete was good, really good. But he was just a magician. And again, obviously, the first club was a 3-iron on the beach, and he just learnt to manipulate it. He learnt to make the ball sing, by getting into really weird positions with the handle low and the club face open, and he could conjure.
I once wrote a column years ago bemoaning the, rise of the 60-degree wedge, the hybrid, all the clubs that made the game easier for the punters, which is a good thing. But at the top level, I was arguing that this maybe shouldn't be allowed. And he had obviously read it, and he came to me. He goes, "You're right about the 60-degree wedge," because he knew that took away some of his edge.
I felt the way the game is now and the power and all this, that, and the other. And people saying, how do we bring back the creativity? I'd have 7 clubs.
Yeah,
I'd say, right, you're now playing with 7 clubs.
And why don't we have a tournament time of year that does that?
Yeah,
that'd be great. I'd watch that.
I mean, Andy Sullivan recently played the Belfry with a 5-iron and broke 80. That's incredibly. But yeah, I think limit the number of clubs so they have to be creative. You now haven't got a club that is dialed in to go a certain number. When you grip it down the club, you can take 5 yards off it, you can shorten your swing. So give them 7 clubs, it'd be fascinating to watch. And I think you'd bring back a lot of the creativity, and you'd bring back the guys that would dominate because their skill level would be higher.
Yeah. Right. We need to start talking about television. How did you get into that? That's the obvious first question.
Okay, so the first route into sort of teaching in terms of being well known as a teacher came through Golf World magazine, which I know you worked for a long time. So I was doing a thing called the International Golf Show. I'd been invited to go and stand on a stage and do presentations on how to start playing the game, I think, to a beginner's kind of class. And Mike Brosnan of Golf World, who you will know very well.
I did. He and I got to the quarter-final of the Sunningdale Foursomes.
There you go. Wonderful for him and his brother James. Great guy.
I miss him,
Mike, very, very sadly missed. James is still around, thank goodness. But he saw me doing this demonstration and said, "Who do you write magazine articles for?" And I said, "Nobody. Why would I? I don't know anything special." And he said, "No, I think you've got a talent for this." And he got me into the magazine, writing articles.
What year would that be?
Oh, goodness. Mid-80s, I would say. Early to mid-80s. 85-ish, probably.
Yeah, I was there 86 to... middle of 86 to the middle of 88.
Yeah, I mean, I used to read your stuff and admire it very much. So, yeah, I was working for them, doing golf schools for them. And Ewan Murray had given up playing golf and had turned to doing a bit of teaching and starting to do some telly. And he came and did a golf school with me, and we got on very well. And he asked me whether he'd just started to work for Eurosport.
He went to Paris, didn't he?
He went to Paris in what we called an underground dungeon. It was literally just a tiny little 12-inch black and white screen, no information, hardly had a scoreboard, and you were commentating, and the French guys sort of said, well, nobody's really interested in golf, it's cycling and tennis over here, so we need golf covered, but we're not going to throw a lot at it.
Yeah.
So Ewan was there on his own, working for 5 hours, doing a broadcast with only his voice and tough. And so we became friendly, and he said, would you come over and be a guest? He said, I can't get you paid, but I can get your expenses paid. And will you come in and talk a bit about golf swings and this, that, and the other? Didn't need me because he's a fine coach himself. But I went over and did a bit of that. Ewan then moved on to Screen Sport and ultimately to Sky. And Sky said to him, we would like a golf coach to be part of our team because we want to do a magazine show which is all about instruction. And he said, well, I've got just the guy. He's done a bit of TV already. He's a really fine coach, whatever. And I was auditioned for it and got the gig. the biggest imposter syndrome ever in the history of the world.
Well, you say that, but you since then you've done a bit of everything. I mean, there's different roles within the TV. I mean, there's the commentator, there's the interviewer, there's the on-course guy, whatever. You've done them all now.
Yeah. But to start with, I was employed as an on-course commentator. And what I knew about the tour, you could write on the back of a stamp and have room for your address. I mean, it was just ridiculous. I'm just thinking, I'm not qualified in any way, shape or form to do it. Yes, I'm a decent coach of club players. What am I doing out here talking about how Ian Woosnam's going to bend it round this tree? But I got away with it. And I thought, well, if you're going to be given an opportunity, you've got to work your tail off and learn as fast as you can. And I still thought, this is going to last 6 months maximum. There's no way this lasts, because they're going to find me out. And the magazine show started, and that was when I was at my forte. So they're going, oh, we really enjoy you in this. This is where you're coming to for, and we'll give you time for the on-course to come round. And again, I'm a reasonable communicator, so I managed to sort of try to put it simply for the guys at home to understand it. And that
you need a strength to get you in the door.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then if you're in any way bright at all, you'll pick up the rest of it.
Well, yeah, and
that's what's happened. It sounds like that's what happened.
Work ethic, and just saying, okay, you've got an opportunity. It surely will end very quickly, but let's give it everything you've got. Yeah. And for 32 years, I've been giving it everything I've got, and I still feel like an imposter. I still don't feel I should be here. Now they put me into a journalistic role, and when they came to me and said, we'd like you to be the interviewer, I said, no, thank you very much. I love my job on the course. I love it. No homework. I mean, you go out there with the yardage book and talk about golf in the sunshine, watching the best players in the world, Ryder Cups, etc. It is the best job in the world. Whereas interviewing, I'm not even a curious person. So, I just don't want to be the interviewer. And they said, well, we think you can do it and you'd be good at it. So we want to give you a try. And I pleaded with them not to do it. I eventually went to a guy called Andy Melvin, who was second in charge of Sky, lovely, well, I say lovely, hard guy, really hard journalistic brain. If you got it wrong, he'd tell you got it wrong. But I went to him and said, Andy, can I go on a journalistic course before I do this? Because I don't want to make an idiot of myself. And he said, you don't need to. He said, you know much more about the game of golf than the people you're going to be talking to at home. You can ask the appropriate questions.
Somebody told me that once. You know far more than you think you know.
Well, yeah, and maybe that was true. But I said, okay, give me some advice at least. And he said, in his broad Scottish accent, which I might attempt, ask questions. Don't make bloody statements. They drive me mad. Yeah. He said, some of my football guys will say, Man United were fantastic in the first half. And the manager responds, and then you came back at them in the second. He said, it does my head in. Why were Man United so good in the first half? What did you do to become better in the second?
That drives all journalists nuts.
So I have a question mark. I try to have a question mark after everything I say. And that's the only piece of advice I've been given. And I think it's brilliant, because I still get frustrated by watching people interview who don't ask a question, because they could get a yes or no answer. They don't, because people are very generous and they give them a nice answer. But I personally think that should be, if you're asking a question, it should have a question mark. So why did that happen? Who helped you to get that to where you are? Okay,
I mean, I'm going to put you on the spot then. Who are the best interviews and who are the worst?
Who are the best interviews?
Because it's a different thing it's a different thing. I think people listening to this should know that, or at least I think it is. Broadcasting is very difficult, different from journalism.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I can ask questions off air, one-on-one with people that you could never ask on television, because they might get pissed off and walk off, and you can't have that. So anyway, best and worst.
Very different discipline. Padraig Harrington.
Yes.
Love. I mean, mad as a box of frogs. Yes. Incredibly clever at the same time.
Yeah.
So super intelligent, super deep thinker, and you literally just put a microphone under his nose and add any sort of question mark, and you will be fascinated by the answer. Well, you might not agree with it, you'll be fascinated by it.
Here's an example for the people listening to this. The US Open last year in Los Angeles, I was one of about 3 or 4 people who talked to Padraig after his round. 27 minutes he stood and talked to us. That's unheard of.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I did a walk and talk with him. We do the in-round interviews.
Yeah.
And I know I'm never going to get more than 2 questions, because I want it to be over by the time he reaches his tee shot. So you've got 350 yards, you've got 2.5 minutes, whatever it is, to reach the ball. And we did one at the Scottish Open on the drivable par 4, about the 5th or 6th hole.
Yeah.
And I asked him one question, and he spoke until we reached the green. And I said, Padraig, we better call a halt. He said, no, I'm over the green. We can keep going.
Yeah,
so just fascinating. So he's top of my charts. Rory McIlroy for his honesty. You can ask Rory absolutely anything and he'll give you an honest answer. Brilliant. I don't really want to name the bad guys. There are guys that just don't give anything. There are guys, and again, guys that I know socially are quite chatty, but I think they fear saying the wrong thing. And so they just clam up and come out with politically correct answers, which are no fun at all. Yeah. And, you know, most of them you break down over a period of time. They learn to trust you and they learn to understand you're going to ask a question that needs a proper answer and it's not going to trip them up and they're not going to make a fool of themselves. So you break down most of those. But, yeah, there are challenging people. You think, goodness, how am I going to make this last a minute and a half? Yeah. And sometimes I'll have 6 questions. And so at the end of it, I will have done way more speaking. And that is my goal as an interviewer, is to do as little speaking as I can, because you want to listen to Padraig, you don't want to listen to me. And one of my bosses, Mike Allen, is a brilliant director for Sky, the best director we have, and does Ryder Cup and stuff. He said, you need to luxuriate in your questions more, because you speak very quickly anyway, naturally. I do. Fortunately, I think you can understand what I'm saying most of the time, even though it comes out rapid fire. I wish I didn't, but it is what it is. And I also try and ask very concise questions, and I sit and think about how to phrase them, because I don't like waffle. Yeah. Corey Pavin once paid me a massive compliment at the Ryder Cup in Wales when he was captain against Monty. He said, I hate you. And I said, well, I've hated you for a long time, since that combat at Kiowa Island. So we had a nice bit of banter going. Yeah. And I said, why do you hate me? And he said, because your questions come at me really fast and they're really short and I don't get chance to think about the answer. He said, when an American interviewer asks me, I get plenty of time as they're waffling on to tell me, you know, I think, I'm going to go around this in this way. He said, yours go, bam, tell me, bam, tell me. He said, I hate you. So I took that as a great compliment, because that's what I'm intending to do, is I don't want to be part of that interview. I'm the conduit to get to the knowledge that these guys are giving out. So that's my rationale.
Yeah, I mean, that is a nice compliment. One of the nicest things ever said to me was I ghost Jeff Ogilvy's columns for Golf Australia magazine.
One of my favourite people, Jeff Ogilvy.
Mine
so
too.
Bright,
he's far too bright in some ways for golf. But anyway, his mum said to me once that it sounds just like Jeff.
Really? Wow, that's
and I thought, well, that's the plan. So
that's terrific.
Doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, ghosting him. Tricky. I couldn't do that because I'm not bright enough.
No, I tell you what, it's the easiest job in the world. Yeah, and it just write down what he says.
Yeah, and again, he was a lovely interviewer. You can talk about favourite interviews. Always fascinating. Always honest. You know, you could ask him anything. So those are the guys you want to talk to, aren't they? So
yeah. Have you ever had one go really badly wrong?
Yeah, not really through my own fault. God rest his soul. A guy called Pat Furlong, who passed away here in St Andrews, was a legendary part of our TV broadcast. Scottish guy, and was in television his whole life. Gem of an individual, lovely guy. And as I say, passed away at this championship. I think somebody said to me this morning 15 years ago, which is incredible. And Pat was very enthusiastic and loved to be with the superstar players and mix with them and whatever. And we had one where it was a senior open. Greg Norman was leading it and into the weekend, I'm going to say, from memory. And he finished very poorly in this particular round. And it was the time he was going out with Chris Evert, the tennis player. Oh, yeah. And he came off the course and the media guy said, obviously you're still leading, they're going to want to talk to you. And he said, I just need 10 minutes to calm down. So just let me sit with Chris for a while and I'll just chill out and then I'll come and do all the interviews you want. For whatever reason, Pat Furlong wanted him now. And I don't really to this day know why. And it was Pat's birthday as well, so I couldn't even ask him why. But he dragged Greg Norman to me and said, no, Greg, we need you now, which, to be honest, we didn't. Yeah. So, for whatever reason, he may have been told he needed him and he didn't, I don't know. But he turned up and Greg rounded the corner looking like a wasp had stung his tongue. And he just said, Barty, this better be good. And everything I asked him, he just butchered me. And they were sensible questions. They weren't that bad. Yeah. And my mates were on the phone immediately saying, what did you do to Greg Norman? He just crucified you. And that was the ugliest one. And again, I couldn't really do much about it. But And afterwards, I spoke with Greg and he said, I'm sorry, I just had the ump. And I said, no, I'm sorry that my man got you when you wanted a bit of time. So it was one of those things.
Yeah. Are there anybody out there who won't speak to you anymore?
No.
Like me.
Never.
I mean, I've had a few that...
Oh, absolutely.
That don't want to speak to me anymore.
No, I've been lucky. I've been lucky, but I've also played a very careful game in that respect because we have...
It's different, TV and what I do.
Yeah.
I can live with people not talking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I have challenged players. I have asked them questions they didn't like on occasion, and they've not been happy with me, but they've not got to a point where they've not talked to me. And there have been times when we had a situation when, and I think you talked about it in the Ewan Murray podcast, where Tiger wouldn't talk to Ewan. There was a time Tiger wouldn't talk to David Livingstone. Yeah. So I was the only guy Tiger would talk to. And so I had to make sure I didn't upset him. Yeah. And even then I upset him slightly because I had to journalistically ask him when he left Butch Harmon to go away. And unfortunately, he knew there was an axe to grind here because Butch is a very good friend of mine. And I think he knew that, and he kind of took it as, that's why you're asking the question. I asked him, how will you be better working under a new coach than you were under Butch Harmon? And he saw that as a loaded question. And I felt it was an appropriate question because people were saying, hang on a minute, this guy's the dominant force in golf. Why would you change coach? Why would you change swing? So I felt I needed to ask the question, but I knew he wouldn't like it. And I knew he'd also think there was a personal edge to that question. And he did. So for a while he was a bit cold with me, but he still did it. And I talked to Mark Steinberg about it, and he said he respects you. He can see that you do your homework and you think about what you're going to ask him and whatever. So, he respects you, and he will always work with you in that respect. But he didn't enjoy that question, no.
Yes, it's funny she said. I mean, Butch Harmon is one of the people who won't talk to me.
Is that right? Why?
Yeah. Well,
you must be a nasty person. Well, Butch is lovely. Come on.
That might be so, but I'll tell you the story. Not long after Tiger started working with Hank Haney, after being with Butch, as you just said, and doing incredibly well.
You're not a nasty person. You know I love you. Anyway, carry on.
So Butch went public with criticism of what Hank Haney was doing. It was only a few weeks in.
That's unusual.
I thought so. And I wrote a column criticising Butch for, this is too soon. We don't know if it's going to work. Nobody knows if it's going to work or not, and you don't know if it's going to work.
Yeah.
Plus, it's unprofessional in the bigger sense just for you to even go public with stuff like that.
Right.
And ever since then, I'm on the outs.
Well, I'm amazed that he would criticise, and not unless he was misquoted. I don't know. I haven't asked him.
No, he's never denied it. So.
Okay, that is amazing because he's normally he's very complimentary. He says, this guy's chosen to go a different route, and they often come back. To be fair,
but it was unfair. It was unfair on Haney because at that point nobody knew if it was going to work or not. It was too soon.
Yeah.
And Butch would know that.
Yeah.
And for him to, again, as you say, go public was just, I thought it was wrong.
Yeah.
And I said so.
No, and I completely side with you in that instance, but I would be interested to ask Butch, was he misquoted or whatever? He's never denied it, you say. Because it's totally out of character, that's not Butch in any way, shape, or form.
Absolutely. And
he might think it, but he wouldn't be saying
it. It's nothing to do with my opinion of Butch as a coach. He's fantastic as a coach. I mean, he's terrific.
Yeah. And a wonderful raconteur of a guy. Lovely.
So I hear.
One of my favourite people.
Yeah,
that's a shame because he's a lovely individual. Yeah. I will talk to him.
Yeah. Anyway, we're get away from TV just for a minute. I'm sure that people listening to these podcasts are tired of this, but I have to ask about what you think about Live, PGA Tour. I mean, what the hell's going on? Where are we going to end up? I mean, it's a question I have to ask.
Yeah, I know. But who knows? I mean, obviously, I've got a little bit of skin in the game because Richard Bland is a Live player and has been for 2.5 years very successfully.
It's another one I've upset recently.
Oh yes, I understand that. Yes, we've chatted. I've chatted to both sides on that one, and hopefully we can heal that wound as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, as you say, if you wouldn't be doing your job properly if you didn't upset players occasionally.
Yeah.
And I have had occasions where I've asked players difficult questions. And they have taken the ump, but they haven't got to the point where they won't talk to me. But they easily could have done because they were tough questions. So where were we? What was the point?
Well, just
the Live thing. Sorry.
You mentioned Richard Bland. I mean, I get completely why somebody at his age, and with the career that he'd had, would take the money and go.
Absolutely. And to be honest, all the guys of that age, I can understand why they did it.
Me too. Yeah.
Where it's headed, I mean, I wish I could give you an answer. I really don't know. I mean, we all have sources. We have people we talk to supposedly in the room and whatever. Some of those sources are saying to me they're nowhere near making a conclusion to the talks and coming up with a viable agreement. Other people are saying, no, actually, they made significant progress in the meeting they had in New York recently or somewhere?
Yeah. September 11th.
Yes, or the day before, I think. So they got criticised for that, But some of my sources, for argument's sake, are saying they made very significant progress there and they think a deal will be done in the next 12 months. Other people are saying not. So,
well, I think significant is that nobody from Guy Kinnings downwards at the European Tour is denying the fact that it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if the talks all fell apart and the PGA Tour go off and do their insular American thing, and everybody else got together and created something.
Have they actually said that?
No, I haven't said that.
No.
They're not denying that. That would be the worst thing.
Yeah.
I think that would be the best thing for the European Tour. They'd be part of something huge, worldwide. In Australia, this is a Golf Australia publication, if you like. There'd be a month in Australia every year on those great courses in that great weather with those great players. Yeah. That has got to be better than what we've got right now.
Oh, no doubt. And the only suggestion I heard in respect of the Live PGA Tour, DP World Tour, all coming together, that kind of nearly made sense, and I thought, okay, it might be workable. I don't think it is, but it might be. Was the suggestion that they have a season that runs a world tour, which encompasses hopefully Australia and the Far East and the best tournaments in Europe and whatever. So a world tour of about 18 tournaments that runs from February until November, which is essentially the PGA Tour with a few knobs added on. Yeah. 18 tournaments there, and then that runs from February until end of September. And then in October and November, or October and January, sort of whatever, 8 live events. And so you've got 26 there, plus the 4 majors, 30, and the players are required to play 22.
Right.
They have to play 4 live, they have to play 14 World Tour, and they will play the 4 majors. That, you kind of went, okay, yeah, that kind of might work. I think it's probably obviously been talked about, and from the rumour I hear is that Liv say, no, we want to be year-round. We want to be part of the whole big infrastructure thing and whatever. We don't want to be put into a couple of months and left to do our thing. But so I just don't know how they can make it work, because it sounds like they've both got red lines that they're not prepared to cross.
Yeah, I'm always intrigued by the fact that mixing it up has never been an option legally. I mean, if I was a member of the DP World Tour, if I was Lee Westwood or Henrik Stenson or Graham McDowell, those guys who jumped, why is it that I can't say to my lawyer and say, look, I'm happy to fulfil the minimum requirements and maintain my membership of the European Tour, as well as playing all these live events. Why can't I do that in a legal sense? You know?
Because our colleague Jay Townsend joining in. Yeah, obviously because of the release thing. Because if you're going to play in an event opposite a DP World Tour event and you're a DP World Tour member, you have to ask to be released to play in that event. And that means
even if 14, you're fulfilling the minimum.
Well, that's the rules at the moment. Obviously, they could adjust those rules, and maybe one day they will. But at the moment, they say, no, if you want to go and play on another tour and you're a member of our tour, you have to ask our permission, and we're not giving it.
I'm surprised it's never been fought legally, that.
Yeah, I suppose. But at the end of the day, the players do sign a document to say, I will abide by these rules, and it's one of them.
Yeah.
So I think legally they just get thrown out until he signed the thing.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, obviously.
Yeah, no. But, so I think once you've signed that document to agree to the rules and regulations of the DP World Tour, then you're pretty scuppered in terms of breaking them and wanting to come back and forth.
What would be your ideal scenario?
Oh, I mean, well, obviously the first thing is everyone's got to get back playing together again. And I think a world tour would be brilliant. I really do. I think it would be brilliant to both encompass the Australian tournaments you've talked about. I've never been fortunate enough to go. I'd love to go. I've seen them on TV. They look magnificent. All the players I coach say they are magnificent. So, yeah, involve Australia, involve the Middle East, involve the best tournaments in Britain and continental Europe. Chuck in the best 7 tournaments in America. Make a world, 8 tournaments, whatever it is. Make a World Series tournament or a schedule around the world. Add in the majors. You know, the team thing with Liv, I mean, obviously I've got a bit of skin in the game with Richard Bland, but honestly it's not to do with that. I watch it because obviously Richard's competing and I need to see him compete, and therefore I have to watch the broadcasts, and I find the team thing quite engaging.
See, me
because
too.
When the countries are playing anyway, when it's Spain versus South Africa versus Australia, I find that really quite interesting. And I think there is something in that team thing. The shotgun start and all this, that and the other business, who knows?
Yeah. If there was a month of the year where it was team golf and everybody was playing, I would watch that.
Yeah.
I don't want in match play. I mean, everybody loves team golf match play. I mean, why would that not work?
Yeah. No, I think there is an element of it that's worthy. I think we should find a way to introduce that into our game. I love that element of it, and I think you would get people rooting for teams and get some partisanship going on and whatever, which would add to the atmosphere at these events and whatever. 72 holes, yes, we'd like to see that, ideally. It's interesting, somebody was saying to me the other day, thinking I'm wearing a live hat, which I don't, because I'm more DP World Tour than I'll ever be live in that respect. But they said, it's starting all over the course and winners coming from everywhere. And I said, only one winner's not won on the 18th in all the tournaments they've played. Bryson DeChambeau's the only one to win out in the country because he came from 7 back and he started on the 3rd and started on the 4th and ended on the 3rd. All the others have finished on the 18th, either in playoff or in regulation. So, is the shotgun start as big a deal as all that? Because it isn't. It's complicated to cover, obviously, and they seem to manage reasonably well. But all the winners are coming down the 18th. So it's not. Most of them are starting at the 1st and finishing at the 18th on the Sunday when the trophy's ended out. So.
I'm going to finish with a crystal ball question. Where do you think, what does this all mean for television, golf on television? Have you got any idea where that might head?
Not really, no, above my pay grade.
Is there a market for, which I've always argued, for a channel where the commentators can say anything and everything they want?
Wouldn't it be
I would
fun?
pay for that.
Oh, wouldn't it be fun?
Knowing some of the people involved.
Yeah, but I'm afraid in this politically correct world we live in, it's never going to happen.
No.
It's less likely to happen now than it ever was. But, yes, we sit round and watch golf sometimes as commentators when we're not on the air, and it makes fascinating listening.
Yeah.
Because people obviously
the language
says it as it is.
The language would be one thing, but that's what my point is, that it would be so interesting.
Yes.
To get people saying what they really think.
Yeah, no doubt, but it will never happen, sadly. It will never happen.
No,
I'd like to involve you in that if it did, because I think you'd have some choice words.
I'd never. People ask me about that. I wouldn't last 5 minutes on television. I'm far too honest.
Right.
Are
you saying we're not honest?
Yeah. Well, you're not honest enough. Put it that way.
Yeah,
because you can't be. It's not you. It's not a criticism of you.
No.
It's a criticism of the system.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously, we do rely on, particularly now with what we call in-round interviews, where I'm actually talking to athletes whilst they play, which I think is an incredible privilege to be given the opportunity to do that. I didn't think they'd take to that at all.
Yeah.
But they have done, and 90% of the DP World Tour now agree to do it, even on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And
I think it's limited, though, that how much you're going to get out of them.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But I think there is. I mean, the public seem to love it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I think because they are. How often do you get to talk to a footballer in the middle of a match? Never. So to talk to an athlete while he's out there. I remember doing an interview with Danny Willett when he led the PGA at Wentworth, BMW PGA, off the 6th tee of the final round. And Danny is someone I can ask anything and will wax lyrical. And so I said to him, basically, take us inside your head and your body and describe what it is you're thinking, you're feeling in this situation, leading a marquee event by one shot in the midst of the final round.
Good question.
And he described it in such fantastic detail. I am shaking all over. My tummy's turning over. My brain is scrambled egg. I can't remember exactly, but he went through the whole scenario. And that was fascinating to the viewer at home to say, actually, he looks as cool as a cucumber, as calm as you like, and inside he's in absolute turmoil. And that was a great insight. So you get some lovely insights. And we've tried to introduce a bit of humour on the first 2 days as well and find out a bit more about their personalities and make them appear more human.
I think the
is
questions.
So we've done a bit of that. I trawl through social media for hours trying to find daft things they've done and bring that into it to show their personalities. And the managers are actually saying to me that's really a good thing, because they're often seen as a very focused individual who's not showing a lot of personality. And just that 1.5, 2 minute chat going down the fairway, we ask them something daft and they come out with something, and the viewer at home goes, hey, this guy's human. He's actually just like me and you. He's got the same sort of frailties. So I think that's been a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, I love those kind of things, because I used to do a anonymous player survey thing for Golf World magazine every year, and a bunch of daft questions. And one person, I won't name him on air because it's anonymous, but one of the questions was, is there any kind of social drug use still going on tour? And a friend, a person you know well, and I know well, he looked at me and he sighed and he went, "Oh, not anymore." he was missing it. So I'll tell you who it is after we finish.
Please do.
Yeah.
Please do. I've got a few guesses, but there you go.
Yeah. Well, no. We'll do that. We'll do that off the air. Listen, Tim, I've kept you over an hour here. I appreciate of your time. It's been a great chat, and thank you very much for coming on.
It's been my great pleasure to be alongside you, Mr. Huggan, and I look forward to listening to a future broadcast by you, because I'm enjoying the ones you're doing so far. They're great.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah, Huggy was spot on when he said Barter's a golf figure with a different backstory, and I hope that you enjoyed listening to that as much as I did. And as always, big thanks to both Tim and Huggy for taking the time to do it. Well, that's it for episode 131, but make sure you followed us on your preferred podcast app, because we're in for a real treat on our next.
My dad said you don't get anywhere in life without working for it, so you can either help your mother with the washing up every night, or you can come and caddy for me.
That's 2004 Women's British Open champion Karen Stupples, next time on The Thing About Golf.